Hello, and welcome back to the official CertCop's series. This is Blue Team Level 1. We're going to get into our introduction here. So continuing on with our discussion here, our introduction. So in Blue Team Level 1, we're going to give an introduction to the Blue Team. We're going to start out with an intro to our company. We're going to talk about what our company is about. We're going to talk about who this course is for. We're going to go over an introduction to the course, prerequisites for the course. So there's going to be a certain amount of knowledge that's going to be expected. We're also going to talk about some of the course lab materials, course scheduling, the exam, as well as a brief intro to Blue Team methodology in general and offensive cyber operations. In the second module, we'll get more into the Blue Team methodology in more detail. So our company is a US-based company. CertCop is designed to provide lots of information in this course, particularly Blue Team operations. We're going to talk about getting Blue Team members to think more offensively or be able to anticipate the maneuvers of Red Team members. We're going to touch on some of the different topics. So this course will be beneficial for not just technical, competent people, but also managers, engineers, and many others. So CertCop is the cybersecurity division of SecBay Incorporated. Team members have an average information technology experience in cybersecurity of over 20 plus years, including areas like cloud, biometrics, cybersecurity. Trainers understand the importance of putting students first in the knowledge transfer process. CertCop is a force multiplier for companies because of our ability to recognize the unique challenges that members and veterans face. Many of our instructors are not only work with veteran companies, work with the federal government and corporations, understand the unique challenges both veterans and government personnel face to become certified to protect and defend Department of Defense networks as well as the global information grid. The student introduction typically would be a short introduction, 30 seconds or less, covering the background, experience, certifications, students' intentions for the course. So thinking about as you're going through this material, what you would like to gain from the course. There's a lot of knowledge out there. You're not going to know everything, but experience and certs will definitely help you. But it's not the end all be all. One thing to have theory and knowledge, it's another thing to apply it in the defense of a network or a system. Of course, setting goals for knowledge and being able to recognize your weak points is inherently valuable. If you're not honest with yourself about the areas where you may lack expertise, because let's face it, there's no one that's going to know everything. IT today has become fairly compartmentalized to where you may have some people that are experts in firewalls, some might be experts in cybersecurity, system administration, others might be application developers. Many different aspects for different jobs and positions in IT roles today. So all of our instructors have a vast amount of experience, as we've said, over 20 plus years in many cases. So this course is going to provide a wide variety of information. So it's not just for one type of person or one type of job description. So getting to know Blue Team operations, to become more well-rounded security experts, as well as being able to think outside the box. So this course is for engineers, IT managers, system maintainers, ethical hackers or people that are interested in the ethical hacking exploits of red team. Some of you may have areas where you're lacking in, you may have questions. Try to cover a nice balance of theory as well as scientific or hands-on labs. This course is going to make you prepared to become fill positions in companies on blue team, particularly similar to SOC analysts, cybersecurity professionals, those that are interested in expanding their knowledge of blue teaming. Even if you're going to be on the other side, the penetration testing side, understanding the blue team will be beneficial for you as well, because if you understand the blue team, then when you're a red teamer, then you can more effectively integrate yourself with the blue team members. And ultimately, that leads to much more value added for the customers. Other job types that might be benefit from this course, you have threat hunters who try to understand better how blue teaming can increase their ability to defend the network and how performing things like hardening and then any other computer network defenders or computer network exploitation teams, as well as forensic specialists who might want to understand these tactics better. So managers need to incorporate blue team activities into their operations. They may not have expertise in house, so it's important to get management involved early on, because that way you can fill critical shortcomings as needed. And these are some of the different job titles that this course will prepare you for, whether you're a C-level executive or whether you're working more hands-on role. It's absolutely a jungle out there, and it's hard to know what information to follow. Whether you're an engineer, project manager, maybe you're a member, maybe you're a DoD member, part of a cyber protection team designed to protect our critical infrastructure. Maybe you're an incident handler. You're dealing with trying to help companies cope with that have either already been breached or have employees that are not trained to handle breaches. This course will be value add for all of those situations. Let's talk about some of the prerequisites. So this course is going to be as much hands-on as possible to make you much more effective at conducting blue team operations. But to get the most out of this class, make sure you have knowledge of topics listed here. This doesn't mean that you still can't take the course, but it's highly recommended. Check out some of our micro courses that we have on CertCop.com. We have a wide variety of topics that can complement your learning process, make you much more effective, and make the course that much more valuable to you. So the recommended experience level ideally would be someone who's had help desk experience, system administrator, network administrator, deeper security knowledge, understanding basics, networking basics, ports and protocols, and services. So basic topics like the OSI model, the Open Systems Interconnection model. Now, if you see an acronym that I use and you're not sure what it is, well, there's of course Google, where you can look it up. Also, you'll have cert tips that have flashcards and have acronym lists. So make a note of it and then come back to it. That way you have full understanding of what material is actually explaining. IP addressing, absolutely. IP version 4, IP version 6, understanding the difference between the two. IP version 6, a much larger address space. Requests for comments, RFCs, understanding what a public address versus a private IP address. So an RFC 1918 address, a private IP, which most people's home networks are private, i.e., not IP addresses that are not routable. So we'll talk about other topics like basic networking, what is an IP address, subnet mask, fault gateway, basic command line skills like PowerShell, Windows environment, difference between a Windows terminal and a command line interface on Linux. You must absolutely have to, at a minimum, you need to understand the TCP/IP stack and the OSI model. Understand what a port is. Having knowledge of networking protocols and port numbers will absolutely help you. All these things, these will get you ready for level 1. Will even help prepare you for some of level 2, because these topics, like anything in life, they build upon each other. So these are some of the different topics we're going to talk about. We're going to start out with introduction, fundamentals. We'll talk about blue team methodologies, get into different networking technologies and tools, how to secure the network, securing hosts and data. We'll look at things like open source intelligence, vulnerability scanning, how to implement the vulnerability management process. We'll talk about the human aspect, how to analyze that reconnaissance data. So on the red team side, they're conducting reconnaissance to find out weak points where they might be able to attack. On the blue team side, you perform reconnaissance like the bad guys would, so you can find out what information is publicly available about your company. We'll talk about network-based threats, securing corporate networks, incident response process. We'll get into some NIST standards for that. And we'll get into advanced attacks. So advanced attacks like distributed denial of service, amplification attacks, network time protocol attacks. And we'll look at how to determine the impact of incidents. So once you have an incident, you have to figure out what your critical data, how well your organization is able to withstand it. We'll talk about risk management. We'll go into some of the different risk management tools and processes. We'll talk about preparing an incident response toolkit and how to implement different security controls to protect critical resources for an organization. We'll talk about selecting the best course of action. And we'll do some intro to some Linux Plus commands and topics that will benefit you, because even Microsoft recently has admitted that it's important to understand Linux, because if you understand Linux, then you can understand the cloud. You can understand things like Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services. We'll look at different network services, how to set up localization in Linux, depending on where you are in the world. We'll look at process management, package management, how to install packages, and packages are really just a binary executable, like an executable in Windows. We'll look at how to add other repositories to Linux as well. Different Linux installations will have different ways of managing packages. We'll talk about compliance. We'll look at frameworks, policies, and procedures. We'll talk about identity and access management. Also cryptography and PKI from a defensive perspective. Benefits of cryptography, especially with respect to hardening. Cryptography runs pretty much the gamut of cybersecurity. And typical messaging today on things like WhatsApp and Facebook and other online chat applications, if you don't have end-to-end encryption, you're not going to be secure. It means the bad guys will be able to listen in on what you're saying and possibly be able to use it against you. We'll talk about compensating controls to when there's sometimes events that you cannot deal with, you'll put in a control to help mitigate that. We'll talk about secure software development. Depending on what language you're using, whether it's .NET, Java, Go, Python, Ruby. We'll talk about policies to mitigate risk. We'll even touch on some of the federal government initiatives. Wireless networking. We'll cover forensics, computer forensics specifically, but we will touch on mobile forensics somewhat. We'll talk about administering users and groups, how to manage user permissions and group permissions, especially in Linux, because everything in Linux is a file, so every file has almost a separate access control list. And we'll talk about storage. We'll look at protecting files. We'll look at corporate governance, compliance. We'll cover different aspects of incident response, ownership, permissions. We'll look at access and authentication and how it relates to identity and access management. Talk about logging, things like syslog and web server logs and cloud logs. And we'll talk about security information and event monitoring as part of your continuous monitoring process. We'll look at network performance. We'll look at firewalls, particularly Linux firewalls as an example, but we'll talk about different kinds of firewalls. We'll also touch on Kali Linux as part of the other certification we have, the Kali CKLPT. Kali Linux is just an offensive distribution of Linux that you can utilize as part of a red team or as a blue teamer to defend the network. We'll get into biometrics, bash scripting, as well as threat and vulnerability management. We'll continue on with software and system security. So once you've how to develop secure software, secure coding practices, how to secure servers against web vulnerabilities that are in the code. We'll get into security operations and monitoring, troubleshooting their users. We'll even touch on SCADA and industrial control systems. So what's the schedule? This is going to be a 5-day course. The instructor will not be able to demo all the tools. We will budget time in for labs, but the pace will be at the instructor's discretion. If you're doing a live class, if you're doing the on-demand class, then you will have essentially a self-paced option. The 40-hour course for level 1, typically 4 to 5 lectures per day if you're doing it remotely or on site. And you will get course completion certificates to be able to add that to your continuing education credit hours to maintain other existing certifications. These are some of the different blue team actors. So they may be part of the blue team, either part-time, full-time, or they may be a secondary job role that they fill. Incident handlers, physical security, forensic analysts, incident responder. We'll talk about all these. This is not all inclusive, but these are many of them. Talk about the different color teams as a whole, because it's important to know if you only know one side, you're leaving yourself open to attack. So we have the red team. Red team is offensive by nature. And its activities include Penetration testing, ethical hacking, running enumeration scans, conducting wireless site surveys, exploits. Defenders, you have SOC analysts, you have trying to detect the red team, as well as indicators of compromise of the system. We'll talk about vulnerability scans, network scans. And the red team and the blue team must coordinate, share information. That way they can get the most effective end product out of a penetration test engagement. Trying to solve problems. Also talk about the blue team, how it's defensive by nature. We'll also talk about how the red team typically is going to be outsourced to an MSP or MSSP or some third party because you won't have enough people in-house. Whereas with the blue team, you might be able to have mostly internal personnel, but you might need an MSP for certain things. Then we have the purple team. Purple team is not necessarily a permanent fixture, but it's really collaboration between the red team and the blue team. See the crossover here of this Venn diagram. Is this the purple team right here? Or is this the red team? Or is this the red team as interface with the purple team? Probably more so than the blue team. But it can vary. The better you are at sharing information, the more successful your team will be. So let's talk now about some of the lab materials. We're going to extensively use virtual machines and virtualization as much as possible because that drives down the need to have physical servers and physical machines. So you can use things like VMware Player, VMware Workstation, VirtualBox by Oracle. We'll give you the offensive tools, the Kali Linux, the Parrot Linux, and some of the different network tools. IP scanner tools, Nmap, Wireshark. Many of these come pre-installed on Kali and Parrot. We'll get into some of the Linux tools like Whois and ifconfig, traceroute. These are all free tools that come pre-installed either on Linux, but we'll also talk about Windows tools. Ping, NSLookup, MBTstat, NetStat. We'll talk about IDSs like Snort versus antivirus products like Malwarebytes, for example. So we'll also get into physical penetration testing. On the red team side and the blue team side, we'll learn how to prevent these kinds of things. We'll talk about social engineering, some of the different methods that can be used to prevent these kinds of things. But to be able to prevent them, we also have to understand how to test for them to see if people are vulnerable. So we'll cover pretexting, phishing, smishing, look at physical access cards like prox cards. Things like the Proxmark, which can write its own cards or write the codes that which are essentially numbers to the cards. We'll talk about vulnerability scanning tools like Nessus, OpenVAS, Nikto, and also Nmap. We'll get into behavioral versus signature-based detection, which is a misunderstood area of security. So, depending on the course, there may be different conditions applied based on the licensing. Lab tools will be demonstrated by the instructor, but the goal is to reinforce the concepts in the course with labs. The Raspberry Pi will be issued to those that are taking live classes, but not for the on-demand. I highly encourage you to purchase a Raspberry Pi you're not receiving one as part of the course because it will be invaluable to you in your learning of Linux commands, and it's also just a way to build an extra machine or a jump box or a hacking box, as it were. The exam, number of questions, 100 questions, 3-hour exam. A mix of drag and drop matching questions, performance-based questions. So similar to other certification exams that are out there, but at a much better value. We'll talk about exam fees, exam prep tools. You can find out about all that on CertCop.com. The exam prep tools will come with the course, like flashcards, cert tips, and as well as practice questions and the practice tests. There are many different training methods available via the website, virtual live training, instructor-led training. If you head on over to CertCop.com, you can look at the top menu here, the Stay Home and Get Certified. You can search for courses. You can look for individual certifications. You can look for micro courses. We have cybersecurity and forensics courses, on-demand training, classroom training, virtual live training. Just some of our featured courses here, comptia certifications, and our upcoming schedule. If you want to find a course, you can browse the catalog. And you can see different courses that are available sorted by category. Go over to SecBay, you can see all the security-minded courses. And you can also see the testing policies and exam retake policies, exam information, certification, voucher information, etc. So let's talk about the blue team methodology briefly. What does a defender see? Well, the blue team is a defensive endeavor. These are some important questions to ask. What type of security incidents have you experienced in your time? Whether it's a malware attack, a phishing attack, corporate spillage, leakage, physical intrusion. How can a hacker exploit vulnerabilities to escalate privileges? So it's important to be able to understand the bad guy so you can think like the bad guy. And also be able to stop them, deny them the attack vector. What kind of sensitive information is vulnerable in the network? So what is the vital information? The confidential corporate data. So we also, some other questions to ask are, how could a blue teamer defend against hackers spread malware? Talk about how the blue teamers can use security research to help defend the network. What a security incident would look like. So everyone's skill set will be different, and it's important to get people to think outside the box and start questioning the network and questioning the things they see. Be able to utilize everyone's skills more effectively. So what is the blue team? The blue team is, according to NIST's definition, blue teams are the group responsible for defending an enterprise's use of information systems by maintaining its security posture against a group of mock attackers, i.e. the red team. Typically, the blue team and its supporters must defend against real or simulated attacks over a significant period of time. Must be in a representational operational context, such as part of an operational exercise, and according to rules established and monitored within the help of a neutral group refereeing the exercise, i.e. the white team. We don't have a separate course on the white team, but you may run into that term in your different red team, blue team engagements. So blue teams are a group of individuals that conduct operational network vulnerability evaluations. They provide mitigation techniques to customers who have a need for independent technical review of their network security posture. They may not know what their network security posture looks like. They may not understand the threats that they're vulnerable to them, especially if they're in the small and medium-sized business player, or they don't have a lot of IT personnel. The blue team identifies security threats and the risks in the operating environment, and in cooperation with the customer, they're able to analyze the network environment and its current state of security readiness. Based on their findings, they can provide recommendations that integrate into the overall solution to increase the readiness and cybersecurity posture. Oftentimes, the blue team is employed by itself or prior to having a red team test the systems. The last topic in the introduction is to discuss offensive and defensive cyber operations. Cyberspace operations are categorized as follows. Offensive cyberspace operations. They're designed to protect power by the application of force and through cyberspace. These operations are authorized like operations in the physical domains. They're both. So defensive operations are operations to defend DoD or other friendly cyberspace. They are both passive and active operations and are conducted inside and outside of the DoD information networks. DoD operations are designed to build, design, configure, secure, operate, maintain, and sustain DoD communications. So that concludes our introduction. We talked about the company as a whole. We looked at the course, what's going to be in the course, who's the course for. We talked about prerequisites, course materials, the schedule, exams, and a bit about blue team methodology and also cyber operations. So that concludes this introductory module. I appreciate your attention, and we'll see you in the next module. Welcome to the course, and thank you.